New to Medicare? Go to myhealthpolicy.com. With myhealthpolicy.com, you can compare plans from some of the nation's top insurers. Start now to find a plan and apply online. myhealthpolicy.com makes it easy to find a Medicare Advantage plan in your area, including plans for $0 a month in plan premiums, low out-of-pocket costs, and expansive provider networks.
My decision, my Medicare. myhealthpolicy.com.
You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about sports in the state of Michigan?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast, the show that provides research and statistics about all the Detroit and Michigan sports teams, whether fans like it or not, and detects, exposes, and reveals actual and hidden facts and truth that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no slappiness, no coddling, no pop culture, no conspiracy theories, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website, themichigansportstruthpodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Michigan_Truth, and like the show's 2 Facebook pages, one of them at Michigan Sports Truth, and the other created by Stables.network. Visit Stables.network's website, primetimewiththestablesnetwork.com, like Stables.network on Facebook, and follow Stables.network on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Stables Network. The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers, nor does it represent or compete against any mainstream media in the state of Michigan. It is also not for entertainment or debating purposes. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them. And it is for every sports fan's own good because the truth is out there. I'm Taylor Phillips along with Ed Smith and Frank Vasner. Ed Smith, how was your week and how are you doing tonight?
Well, my night and my week basically has been made better by the news of what Joe Biden did regarding his running mate selection. Other than that, I'm feeling quite well, but that news certainly bumped it up. Other than that, I hope everybody else is doing well.
Yep, awesome. Frank, how about yourself?
Well, my week's been somewhat interesting. I celebrated my 32nd birthday on Monday, and plus I'm also in the process of changing jobs too. I pretty much let the cat out of the bag here. I have accepted a position at the Amazon warehouse up in Romulus, Michigan, and don't worry, it will not affect my status with you guys, as that's only 4 days a week, but it's a chance for me to get a 40-hour week and get some full-time work and get paid some decent money.
Awesome. Congratulations. Follow me on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at DT2Phillips. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at EdSmith313. And follow Frank Vasner on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Frank_Vasner. We have ESPN stories to go over, which involve Red Wings television play-by-play commentator Ken Daniels. More developing news on the Dr. Anderson scandal. More developing news on the Dr. Anderson scandal, and Lions Hall of Fame running back Barry Sanders. Plus, we've got Tigers Weekly to go over, including Matthew Boyd getting even worse and not even improving a bit. And finally, some important news about fall college sports. But first of all, Ken Daniels. From John Barr and Mike Farrell of ESPN, headlining Florida doctors arrest a bittersweet moment for the voice of Hockey Town. Well, one of the voices of Hockey Town, may I add. For Ken Daniels, the longtime play-by-play voice of the Detroit Red Wings on television on Fox Sports Detroit, it was a moment of elation. Yeah, finally, he thought to himself. Ken's ex-wife, Lisa, says she started shaking and crying when she heard. Their emotional reaction came after hearing the news last week that Michael Ligotti, a Delray Beach, Florida doctor, had been arrested by the FBI for his alleged role in a massive insurance fraud scheme. Jamie Daniels, Ken and Lisa's son, had been one of Ligotti's patients. On December 7, 2016, Ken was the first person in the family to receive the devastating news that Jamie had died of an overdose in a South Florida home where he had been trying to stay sober. Jamie was 23. He left behind Ken, Lisa, and younger sister Arlene, his best friend, as Ken describes her. Ligotti, at age 46, an osteopathic physician, was charged July 29th with conspiracy to commit health fraud and wire fraud. A criminal complaint, unsealed last week, alleges that from May 2011 through March 2020, Ligotti billed private insurance companies and Medicare approximately $681 million for laboratory tests claiming and other services as part of a fraudulent scheme for which he was paid approximately $121 million. Ligotti generated millions of dollars by preying on patients seeking substance abuse treatment. Acting Assistant Attorney General Brian C. Rabbit of the Justice Department's Criminal Division said in a statement about the charges, quote, healthcare providers who allow greed to take precedence over their Hippocratic oath and participate in these schemes are criminals and will be held accountable, unquote. Ariana Fajardo-Orshan, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, said in the statement, Ligotti, who has been released on bond, looks forward to establishing his innocence. His attorney, Ben Curtis, told ESPN, quote, we do not believe the U.S. Department of Justice claims, and that is exactly what they are at this point, just one-sided claims, unquote. Ken and Lisa Daniels say they believe Jamie was one of the patients Ligotti used to bill for fraudulent claims. In the 8 months prior to his health, Jamie had been in and out of drug rehabilitation facilities in South Florida, battling an addiction to prescription opioids such as Vicodin and the anxiety medication Xanax. He died of an overdose of heroin that had been laced with fentanyl, a synthetic and far more potent form of the drug, according to an autopsy report and death certificate. As East 60 first reported in April 2018, Jamie's death revealed to his parents something they had never considered when they sent him to Florida to get help for his addiction, a corrupt side to the billion-dollar rehabilitation industry in South Florida, where federal laws are exploited by people who actually have no interest in keeping recovering addicts clean. Jamie had been caught in an alleged insurance scam known as the Florida Shuffle. By April 2016, when Jamie first sought treatment in South Florida, Palm Beach County was the epicenter of the state's opioid crisis. 571 people died from overdoses that year alone, the most of any country in the state, and a 110% increase from the previous year, according to an analysis of state data at the time by the Palm Beach Post. After detoxing at an inpatient facility, Jamie moved to different recovery centers before eventually moving in late November 2016 into what's known as a sober home in the middle of a residential street in Boynton Beach. Mark Woods, a code enforcement officer for the city of Delray Beach, told ESPN in a 2018 interview, quote, the whole concept of having kids in a sober house to mutually support each other and keep each other honest and struggle together for sobriety is pretty good done right. Done wrong, the results are much worse. Woods spent 30 years working as a police officer in Delray Beach before retiring in 2009. In 2014, when he was working as a code enforcement officer, Woods said he noticed a shift in the character of sober homes that dotted residential neighborhoods in his area. Shortly after the federal Affordable Care Act kicked in, Woods said insurance companies lifted the limits on policies for drug treatment, essentially giving treatment centers a blank check. Around that same time, Woods said, many sober home operators realized urine samples could be liquid gold because the insurance companies would be required to reimburse them for tests. Woods said, quote, the recovery industry took a turn for the worse when people found out that the urine testing billing was lucrative and the wrong people got in the industry to enrich themselves, unquote. It was the perfect storm. Sober homes, by then estimated to number in the hundreds, opened in neighborhoods across Palm Beach County. And because of the privacy protections afforded addicts under federal laws, local governments could do little about what was happening in them. Dave Ehrenberg, state attorney for Palm Beach County, told ESPN in another 2018 interview, quote, you have sober home openers who are using that law designed to protect individuals in recovery so they can prey upon people in recovery. In the Florida Shuffle, you go in and out of recovery, in and out of rehab centers, in and out of sober homes, milking the individual for the insurance until that person dies. Our current system isn't really a recovery model, it's a relapse model where the big money is in relapse, unquote. When contacted this week, Ehrenberg said his country has had success in recent years cleaning up the corrupt side of the rehab industry. He said there have been 109 arrests since October 2016 and called Ligotti's arrest, quote, the most significant of its kind since Kenny Chapman, unquote. Chapman, who ran several treatment centers and sober homes in Palm Beach County, was sentenced in May 2017 to more than 27 years in federal prison for defrauding insurance companies of an estimated $24 million between 2013 and 2016. Ehrenberg said in a statement released to ESPN, quote, "Our investigators have spoken to thousands of individuals with substance use disorder, as well as many parents of children who have died of opioid overdoses. Nearly all of them have been touched by Dr. Legati's medical practice. In addition, most of the individuals we have prosecuted for operating rogue sober homes or corrupted treatment facilities have also had dealings with Dr. Legati," unquote. And ultimately, Ken Daniels' insurance provider determined it had been billed for roughly $60,000 in fraudulent charges for various facilities that claimed to house and treat Jamie. Most of these charges were for urine tests completed over a 2-month period in the fall of 2016. The allegations in last week's criminal complaint against Legati detail how he became the medical director for more than 50 addiction treatment facilities or sober homes, and that he repeatedly authorized bogus tests and treatments, billing for urine tests, blood tests, office visits, and therapy sessions, whether they were needed or not, and in some cases, whether or not they actually happened. The criminal complaint states, quote, "Numerous former patients, employees, and associates working with Legati have provided information to law enforcement regarding fraudulent activity," unquote. In Jamie's case, medical records reviewed by ESPN revealed that specimens for 3 urine tests authorized by Legati were collected in Florida in late November 2016, yet Jamie wasn't actually in Florida on those dates to give the urine samples. He was visiting his family in Michigan over Thanksgiving, something ESPN was able to confirm after reviewing plane tickets and date-stamped photographs. When asked in 2018 why he would order drug tests on dates when a patient wasn't even physically present to provide a sample, Legati told ESPN such a request would absolutely be fraudulent. He said, quote, "If that specimen was ordered on a day where the patient wasn't in the state of Florida, that would absolutely be a fraudulent specimen, and I wouldn't have ordered it. I couldn't have ordered it," unquote. Legati explained that he was the victim of identity theft. In 2013, he wrote a letter to Florida's Department of Children and Families, the state agency that regulates medical care at substance abuse treatment facilities, notifying the agency that somebody had stolen the ID number he uses to authorize drug treatment. Ken Daniels said he's lying of Legati's 2018 explanation, adding, quote, "Legati was a so-called addiction specialist, but he was addicted to getting as much money as he could. He didn't care about his patients," unquote. Curtis Legati's attorney declined to discuss specifics of the case. Lisa Daniels says she turned documentation relating to Jamie's case over to a task force in Palm Beach County, which includes a representative of the FBI and investigates healthcare fraud in the county's rehab industry. It's not clear whether evidence from Jamie's case was used to charge Legati. In the spring of 2018, after first telling Jamie's story to The Athletic and later E60, Ken Daniels began speaking publicly about his son's struggles with addiction and the insurance scam that hindered Jamie's recovery and ultimately contributed to his death. Lisa Daniels has since told Jamie's story to a congressional subcommittee. Through the Jamie Daniels Foundation, they have raised money for an 80-unit facility, which Ken says they plan to build in southeast Michigan, where Detroit is, I may add, by the way, to house people suffering from substance use disorder. While buoyed by the news of Legati's arrest, Ken and Lisa realized that their work honoring Jamie's life is far from over. Lisa says of Legati's arrest, quote, "I'm elated that he was charged. We got one, and this was a big fish, but there are thousands more out there," unquote. The FBI is asking potential victims or those with information related to Legati or his former Delray Beach clinic, Whole Health, to email reportml@fbi.gov and use the title Legati Whole Health in the subject line of the email. That is the end of this article. So, guys, we're going to turn over to Ed Smith first, as usual, and then we're going to turn it over to Frank. So, Ed, Ken Daniels and his family got the justice they deserved because Jamie was overdosed by Legati himself. Enough said there. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's basically the easy headline to say on the surface. Obviously, there's way more murky details underneath, but when you consider the fact that Ken's son, for all intents and purposes, was taken advantage of by this person, the supposed doctor, if you want to even call him that, while it didn't directly contribute to his son's death, I could definitely see why Ken and his ex-wife would hold this man in some ways responsible for what happened. Now, granted, he didn't forcibly make Jamie, do the actions that he did, but still, it showed with the actions that he did or did not show. It definitely revealed how he truly cared of whether or not anything bad were to become of Jamie or anyone else for that matter, as we saw, as what we can tell from the details of the article you just finished. Still, I'm sure it was a very raw and a very sore subject for Ken and his family to deal with, as evidenced by the emotional reaction that they had when they got the news, which is understandable because when you lose a family member at that age in that fashion, and you figure out the circumstances that led towards that moment, you would feel some type of way about it too. So I don't blame Ken or his family sharing that sentiment. It should be served as a lesson for those that, if they have to seek help for what's bothering them for any type of problem or addiction, there are other, better, more legitimate ways to do it. There's internet research, online research, phone numbers you could search or call or dial, whatever the case may be, to get the proper help that you need. I'm sure Ken wished that his son had more better help than that, but still, it is at least a lesson that could be used for others. And, Jamie wasn't the only one that was affected by this. I'm sure, with the amount of time, the amount of years, the amount of money that this man made, there are more out there that has similar stories like Jamie's, if not exact fates or similar outcomes, then close enough to it. And I think it just shows, unfortunately, of how one aspect of how the system maybe is in terms of financial-wise in this country, where people like this can take advantage of vulnerable people, those that may have problems or may not know better, knowing full well that they will make a profit off of that person's life and suffering, more than likely. And you can tell by their ulterior motives, they don't really give a damn or care about that person at all. So it's unfortunate that we see cases and situations like this pop up more and more often. That's what happens that when you have the system that this country currently has. So until those changes are made, you're going to see cases like this pop up. Fortunately, though, if we see more people like this getting arrested and brought down for the actions they committed that have affected the lives of so many people and so many families, it would serve, again, as another lesson to those out there that think they want to try and use this system. Well, this is your end game goal if you go down that route.
Right. And Ken and Lisa did all they could, and Dr. Ligotti got what he deserved. So, Frank, we're going to turn over to you now. So, Frank, any follow-up? What say you?
Well, I mean, when I first heard about this story, that when it aired on E60 a couple of years ago, I mean, Ken Daniels even said it best in there. It's just something that makes you sick. That there are people in this world who would take advantage of those trying to overcome their demons and clean their lives up. And it's sad that Jamie Daniels was a victim and became a statistic in this deal. But I think I can say that Ken Daniels, his ex-wife Lisa, and their daughter Arlen, they have gotten close. They are getting closure because Ligotti has been arrested and charged. And I sure believe wholeheartedly that he will be convicted and he will be spending a very long time in prison, and they will finally get their closure for what he did. But that's also not going to be the end of the story. There are people, like Ed said, there are people like Ligotti out there. It's not just in Florida. They may even be in Southeast Michigan too, because my county of Monroe County has had a problem with heroin addiction and overdoses, and people are trying to get help. So hopefully this will be propelling the change needed to get these people the help they need and get clean and not becoming a statistic of health insurance fraud.
Exactly. So we're going to keep an eye on for more of this developing story. This is now another developing story, just like this next one here that we're going to get to right about now from ESPN via the Associated Press, headlining Black victims of University of Michigan doctor seek equity in settlements. Dozens of Black former University of Michigan student athletes who say they were abused by a sports doctor at the school asked Wednesday to be treated fairly as the university settles hundreds of lawsuits expected to cost the institution millions of dollars. They're demanding that victims of Dr. Robert Anderson receive fair compensation based on their trauma rather than based on their color. Most personal injury cases are settled out of court, with the amounts often based on data that projects lower lifetime earnings for blacks, Latinos, and women than white men, said Parker Stinar, an attorney with the Denver-based Wahlberg, Woodruff, Nimmo, and Sloan law firm. A former Michigan football player and wrestler discussed their experiences during a news conference at a hotel in the Detroit suburb of Novi. Dwight Higgs, who captained the Wolverines football team in 1977 before going on to win 2 Super Bowls as a 4-time Pro Bowl defensive back for the San Francisco 49ers, said, quote, "I still love the University of Michigan. I hope the University of Michigan understands and acknowledges what happened to so many of us, and I would hope that they would recognize the trauma that was bestowed on us," unquote. Stinar said that nearly half of the 750 men who say they were sexually abused by Anderson are black. He said, quote, "As plaintiff trial lawyers, we are familiar with the prejudices that jurors have against plaintiffs, especially plaintiffs that are minority men. Historically, black men receive the lowest verdict or settlement awards, especially compared to white men and women," unquote. The university has acknowledged some employees were aware of accusations against Anderson before the 2018 complaint. The school started an independent investigation into the claims, which date back as far as the 1960s. The university has not yet shared details of any settlement process, a spokesman said Tuesday in an email. Insurance companies and courts rely on testimony of economic experts who use wage tables to calculate damages, according to a 2018 report by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. The report, How Race, Ethnicity, and Gender Impact Your Life's Worth, Discrimination in Civil Damage Awards, says the data typically comes from the quarterly population survey by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. That data is based on the race, ethnicity, and gender of the person filing the lawsuit, and since blacks, Latinos, and Hispanics and women of all races typically earn less than white men, the damages offered and awarded often are less than what white men would receive, the report said. Darely Rodriguez, director of the Economic Justice Protect of the Lawyers Committee and the report's co-author, said, quote, "The practice of forensic economists using race, gender, or ethnicity to calculate civil damages really hurts communities of color and women because historically they have been paid less because of structural and systemic discrimination in the workplace," unquote. Dollar amounts of many settlements aren't publicized because 90% of personal injury and wrongful deaths are settled out of court, Rodriguez said, quote, "A lot of the discrimination that we discussed in our report happens behind closed doors," unquote. The Associated Press left messages Tuesday seeking comment from the National Association of Forensic Economics. Aaron Richardson, an emergency physician and former wrestler at the University of Michigan, hopes that the school properly compensates Anderson's victims while developing programs to educate student athletes on what to do if they believe they're victims of abuse. Richardson, who also spoke at Wednesday's news conference, is not yet part of the lawsuits against the school. He arrived as a sophomore in 1994 on the Ann Arbor campus and was seen by Anderson for his annual physicals and occasionally for strep throat. He said, quote, "I vividly remember being in the exam room, him looking in my throat, him giving me antibiotics, but he also did a genital exam, and I remember seeing posters on the exam room talking about how to properly perform a testicular exam," unquote. Anderson performed the exam under the guise of checking for cancer, said Richardson, who is black and now lives in Chicago. He said, quote, "I feel like I was too naive. I believe he was helping us. It wasn't until later when I'm in medical school understanding that's not part of a normal exam," unquote. So that's the end of that article. Again, we're going to turn it over to Ed and then to Frank Basner. So, Ed, we all know that we've discussed all developing news articles of this whole investigation, and now people of different ethnicities are understandably getting involved. Ed, take the floor.
Well, it doesn't surprise you when you consider the fact that this is a decades upon decades long list of transgressions and atrocities committed against people. Somewhere down the line, you're going to find, for lack of a better word in this term, in this sense, diversity amongst your victims, and that's exactly what we saw the case here with Dr. Anderson. seeing what has happened, not just to other victims, whether it be white or whatever the case may be, it doesn't discriminate, unfortunately. If you're a predator, unless you're an overt racist, then that would affect your view. But clearly, that seemed to not have been a problem for Dr. Anderson. It is unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that this is the case, but it doesn't. Again, it's not too much of a surprising factor. Knowing that, again, as was detailed in the article, of how the system treats victims that are people of color or may not be in affluent situations compared to their whiter compatriots or those who may be at a better class, quote unquote, did you see the difference in how their process is treated and how results get done, and that's got to change. And whenever you hear the talks of the terms of systemic or structural racism or discrimination, it's not just a workplace issue. It's not just an economic issue. It's not just, this issue. It's all sorts of issues, whether it be Justice Department, finances, workplace, whatever the case may be, whatever fields, not just gender, but gender as well, but most especially race. You'd be surprised to see how many qualified people of color in certain spots and situations, because they have a funny name or they have a funny look, whatever, they get automatically overlooked and passed over. You see that from time to time again. There's a term that I often hear being used about people of different backgrounds and ethnicities, particularly black people, having to, quote, work twice as hard just to get half as much. And it's a true statement as I've ever heard, because it seems we have to do, twice the work just to get noticed, barely enough compared to those that don't even have to lift a finger to get noticed. So it is a very unfortunate truth that we're dealing with constantly throughout in this country in terms of many factors and many facets of what true systemic and structural racism is. And, it's going to take a while, long while. Trust me, it didn't just get here on its own, so it's not going to go away on its own just like that either. It's going to take a lot of real work, a lot of real progress. There will be blowback and pushback, of course, but the end goal should always outweigh whatever short-term disruptancies that you see or occur. So I say that all to say this, that, again, the university needs to continuously acknowledge the fact that this is a messed up situation, a situation that grew out far out of control, that should have been nipped in the bud way back, and, make some type of closure or some type of proper way to give the victims of this man the proper closure they deserve, and try to ensure that and set a precedent of how to conduct and follow themselves across all fields, of all facets, different in terms of administration within that school, so that this situation never pops up again.
Exactly. And it'll continue to develop, and it's really sad but true, but that's why we keep an eye on things like this here on the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Frank, anything to add? Any follow-up? What say you?
Well, I pretty much second what Ed said. I mean, this is as messed up as this whole case is. It didn't discriminate. I mean, Robert Anderson didn't care if his victims were rich, poor, black, white, male, female, hail, what religion they practiced, or what flavor of bubblegum they chewed. I mean, and truthfully, everybody deserves a fair settlement in this. And that's something that's going to have to be worked on.
Yep, it's going to have to be worked on, all right. Speaking of the Michigan Wolverines, Anthony Broom of Maize and Brew headline former five-star offensive lineman Isaiah Wilson from last week, which we forgot to cover, says a Michigan recruitment was over when Jim Harbaugh wore cleats in his house, which kind of forced him to leave the University of Michigan and be on the transfer portal. And guys, this is another thing that's grounds for being fired before we get to the third ESPN story. So we're going to give it over to Ed and then Frank first. Just a couple quick takes, one from each. Ed, what say you on Harbaugh?
I think in terms of antics or behavioral moments such as this, I think it was fine. It was funny in the beginning, because he had just gotten here. He was making noise. He was generating buzz and excitement. But over the seasons, over the years, while, yes, the 10-win seasons are nice, you haven't accomplished any of your goals. You haven't beaten Ohio State. You haven't won the Big Ten title. Hell, you haven't even won your division. And you haven't gone to a Rose Bowl, let alone play for a playoff. So people are going to take you less and less seriously with the miscellaneous antics that you pull out, because they see what you have provided with your on-the-field result, and it hasn't lived up to what your mouth has put up or what your antics should decree. It's basically something that I would see Rex Ryan would do when he was when he was head coach of the Jets. This is something that falls out of the Rex Ryan playbook of drawing attention to yourself, even though you haven't built up the proper resume or put in having the right end result product, that backed up what you're trying to sell. You don't see any championship trophies in that case down there that's being on display ever since Harbaugh has gotten here. So while you're still doing this, it's really beyond me. I would focus more on making sure that I'm beating Ohio State and playing for Big Ten championships before I do wacky things like wearing cleats or having sleepovers with other recruits. But that's just me.
Well, sleepovers aren't nearly as dangerous as cleats. As far as taking things into somebody else's house is concerned, that's clearly a fact right there. Frank, anything to add? Go right ahead.
Well, it's just another thing to add for the Harbaugh antics that just show that he's been more sizzle than steak and hasn't sold any results at all. And Ed, I would like to ask you this, since we kind of missed it last week. What is your take on Harbaugh running his mouth at Ryan Day and saying that Day was breaking rules by having instructional workouts, even though that's just a secondary violation by the NCAA? I think, in my opinion, it was very unprofessional by Harbaugh's part. That's something he just needs to address with them privately.
Definitely was.
Yeah, and it comes off as something that's very petulant and, I'll be honest, whiny. It reeks of saying, "Mom, this guy is getting away with stuff, even though I had the power to do it. I just haven't been unable to do it, so I want someone else to do my dirty work for me." That's what it reeks of. I wouldn't have a problem with this if it just beat Ohio State more often. Get one win against Ohio State before you try running him off about, oh, they're cheating and doing this. Like, no one wants to hear it, Jim. No one wants to hear that crap when you're getting 60 points blasted on you year after year. No one wants to hear that when you keep coming up short year after year against your biggest rival when it matters most. No one wants to hear that when you keep winning 10 games only to get your face kicked in when it matters most.
Exactly, and act professionally in the process. So that's out of the way. Now to the third ESPN story involving the Detroit Lions. A former legendary running back, Barry Sanders, from Michael Rothstein of ESPN, headlining, "Dear Barry Sanders finds lost fan mail from nearly 20 years ago." Here we go. The box sat in storage for who knows how many years. 4, 5, 8. Inside were requests from children all over the United States of military serving overseas and families searching for gifts for husbands, children, and grandchildren. All of the letters were addressed to the same man. He would have responded if he had known the letters existed. "Dear Barry." Barry is running back Barry Sanders, the most famous player in Detroit Lions history. He retired more than 20 years ago, but his name remains synonymous with the franchise. Inside a storage closet in the team's practice facility in Allen Park, Michigan, about 150 fan letters were discovered in 2018 by Lions employee Brandon Scott. Sanders said, quote, "I was surprised. I was thinking, man, I'm going to have some hate mail in there. I mean, because of how I retired. The first few years of me being retired, there wasn't much contact between me and the team. The fact that some of the mail was lost for that long, yeah, it was a little bit shocking," unquote. But the mail wasn't hateful at all, may I add. Rather, it was almost to a letter, unadulterated love for Sanders from children who in some cases were barely old enough to remember him playing. They were all written after he retired, often addressed to the Pontiac Silverdome, which helps explain some of the confusion in the first place. How they ended up in Allen Park in a storage closet remains a mystery, and they might still be there if the Lions had not undergone renovations of their facility and Scott wasn't looking for a photo of another player. The kids who wrote Sanders are now adults. Some of the senior citizens who wrote him are deceased. Sanders said all of them will get some sort of response. He said, quote, "It's meaningful. It just shows what kind of a career I was able to have and that I was able to connect with a lot of fans in that way. You know, I'm proud of that. I remember being a fan. I never wrote anyone, but I followed players religiously, so I kind of understand a little bit of that feeling behind the letters. It's a big honor," unquote. Now, below the body of this article are a few photographs of a few of those fans, which are listed, one of which is in the football family. So we're just going to skip ahead. You guys can look all these up either now or later if you want. But we're going to turn it over to Ed and Frank again. Ed, this proves that Barry Sanders still has lots of fans after all these years, which has already been true. It's always been true, despite that radio station down there in Southfield that still keeps hating on Barry Sanders just because he retired early and left the Lions, just because the Lions franchise has still had only one playoff win in 63 years and still counting. Ed, take the floor.
Thank you, Taylor. And it's really great to see and hear this article because it was still known, obviously, but it just reinforces that despite how it ended, the popularity and the love that fans in Detroit and really fans everywhere that admired Barry Sanders and the way, not just the way he played the game, but the way that he carried himself while playing the game, it's still great to see. And Barry, it's good to see that even despite what happened, what went down, that directly led him to make that decision to walk away from the game and do it in the fashion that he did, despite all that fallout, despite the bad feelings and the bad history that may have come about as a result. It is very great to see that despite all that, there are fans that still love Barry. And I think over time, once more people read up on and research and try to put themselves in Barry's position, in Barry's shoes, I think they have more sympathy and understand that, hey, maybe there could have been a different way that he did it in terms of, letting the team know right before training camp via fax. Yeah, I get that, but if you're in Barry's position at that point, it's just, what he was mentally at his mind in terms of the game. At this point, you were just ready to get out, and whatever method it might have taken. And even after all this time, when you see what this franchise has done to the likes and what they have squandered with the likes of a Calvin Johnson, with the likes of an Ndamukong Suh, and what we've seen so far with the likes of a Matthew Stafford, Barry looks more and more better in the light each and every day to make his decision when he did it. And even though, you're going to have your Jeff Riegers of the world that may bash or criticize Barry, saying, "Oh, he shouldn't have done this," or "He quit on the team, he quit on the fans." Again, you're not.
Or Dennis Billion calling Barry Sanders a punk.
And again, yeah, but still, you're not Barry. At the end of the day, you're not in this fight. You didn't go through. Yeah, you might have went through those losses as a fan, but you didn't play the game. You weren't the player that was taking those hits, the player that was carrying the team on your back, the player that was getting disappointed and left out to dry and being let down by your teammates year after year after year after year, to a point where it builds up and you get fed up and you say, "Screw it, I don't have to put up this crap anymore." And Barry, thankfully, he saved up his money. He had enough sense to where, he got out when he did. So at the very least, he preserved his body, his health, and his sanity. I would too, after, dealing with this inept franchise for as long as Barry did. So, if you want to criticize him, say you could have done it better, again, it's your prerogative. But to me, I have no problem with Barry retiring the way he did, just like I didn't have a problem with Andrew Luck retiring the way he did. I thought it was a shameful atrocity, the way those fans treated that man in Indianapolis, the way he literally broke his body down, put his life on the line year in and year out to carry a pathetic franchise that, by the way, didn't treat Peyton Manning right on the way out, okay? And you saw what he did with his career, and those fans had the temerity and the audacity to boo him. Fans can be such fickle pieces of crap sometimes. I'm sorry, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but when you see situations like this where players have put their life's work, blood, sweat, and tears, putting it all on the line year in and year out, and they're not being shown the same love in return by the franchise that they've putting in the work for, and then that propaganda can be spun and torn about and twisted so that fans say you're the reason, you're at fault, make you look like the bad guy when you're just trying to make the best decision for yourself and your family. Come on, get out of here with that. So it's still great to see that despite all that bull crap, Barry Sanders is still popular, Barry Sanders is still beloved, and regardless of whether or not it was the right way of how it ended, Barry is still always going to be a beloved figure in Detroit sports, period.
Definitely. Whether fans like it or not, Barry Sanders is a legend. Frank, just add on as much as you can.
Well, that's a pretty tough one for me to follow, Ed. Very well spoken on your part. What the things I will add were Barry Sanders wasn't just a legend on the field, but he was also a class act off the field as well. And this article just further emphasized that he discovered this fan mail, and he said that he was going to respond to a lot of it. And those who wrote it to him who have since passed on, he'll at least send them to their families. And that's just something that I've always admired about him, just because of the way he conducted himself away from the field. He always said and did the right things.
Well, if I can add on, Frank, that should be a credit to his father and how Barry was raised by his father.
Yep, that's true.
Amen to that.
Okay, thank goodness, that's an example of sensible black men raising their sons in the best environment that they can, and we see the end result of that. So if Barry Sanders can be an example of what it means to be having a present black father in your life, there it is right there.
Yep, that's true. So those are all of the ESPN articles that we've gone through, and now we shall go over the Tigers real quickly and then get to some college football news before we get to the closing statement segment. Tigers sweep the Pirates because the Pirates are awful, 3-13, but then the Tigers lose 2 of 3 to the Chicago White Sox at home. Matthew Boyd started twice in the past week. He gave up 7 runs in Pittsburgh in 4 2/3 innings, and then today, exact same fate. 7 runs earned, 4 2/3 innings. But Ivan Noah got his first win of the Tigers Saturday. Spencer Turnbull did his thing. Jacoby Jones with a 2-run inside the park home run. On Monday, while Michael Former and Daniel Norris pitched combined shutout baseball for about 5 innings, except the Tigers lost C.J. Cron to a one-hopper nailing his knee, and he's likely due for surgery. Then Tuesday, Tyler Alexander falling flat. Yeah, he's really not that good. 3 2/3 innings pitched, 5 earned runs, 4 hits, 3 walks, just 2 strikeouts. And I understand his 9 consecutive Ks in his outing before that, but that means nothing. Tyler Alexander needs to develop more.
Yeah, very unfortunate. This is a situation where you definitely wish Casey Mize or Matt Manning would have had a slot or a spot up here to get that experience, get that wealth of experience in terms of getting the feel of being around the atmosphere, even if there's no fans, just how the ins and outs of playing regularly every day on the Major League level works. I think there was a very valuable experience they could have learned by having those players up there, but unfortunately it was a waste. Now, I do want to say, though, quite impressed, very impressed with what I'm seeing out of Jacoby Jones. Taylor, if you can remember, I was advocating a little bit for him to be the starting center fielder a few years back when we were doing on our shows on Spreaker or Blog Talk, one of those platforms. Slowed down a little bit in terms of production rate with his offense, but he certainly picked it up. He's had 11 home runs in each of his last 2 seasons. He's already at 5. He's already halfway towards or close to it, what his RBI amount was in all of last year. already showing a better batting average on base, way better slugging and OPS, and just overall production. He's keeping down the strikeouts. He hasn't been a strikeout machine the way Miguel Cabrera has been, which is good to see. You want to see your table centers, or whether at any spot down the lineup, you want to see your batters and your offense produce, especially if they're making improvements from last year. So it's good to see a guy that I once advocated in Jacoby Jones making that progression along the way.
Yep, Jacoby Jones is starting to kick ass, but let me touch on Matt Boyd. He absolutely sucks.
Oh,
period.
God.
He should never pitch again.
He has been absolute hot garbage this season.
And they dub him as an ace.
Real unfortunate, man.
Chris Sales and Alaville never even do a damn thing about it. My God. That's going to be part of my closing statement when we get to that segment. Frank, anything to add before we get to college sports being postponed through the end of 2020, which I just mentioned?
I'm just going to say the following. DFA Boyd, that is all.
Yeah. But, of course, Chris Sales and Alaville aren't going to do that anytime soon because they are ignorant. And, again, I just mentioned my closing statement. It's coming up next. And, yes, like I mentioned before, the NCAA has suspended sports through the end of 2020. So we all knew this would happen. That's pretty much that.
Once the Big Ten made their announcement, it was just a matter of time. That was like the biggest domino that could have fallen when you have a Power 5 conference such as the Big Ten saying, we ain't doing squat this fall. We'll see you in the spring. So that didn't surprise me at all to see the NCAA make that decision. And it really makes you wonder, how is that going to affect in certain levels these kids that may be in their junior, senior years of school making that transition to the pros. Obviously, the NCAA doesn't have a proper plan in terms of combating this. What makes you think the NFL has a better one either if they're not going to follow the similar protocols that we've seen in both the NBA and NHL?
Right, and there have been 0 positive tests. So let's go to the closing statement. We'll give you 1 minute each. Ed, we'll start with you. Go ahead. And, it has something to do with Jamie Samuelson dying.
Yes, that would be correct. Ever since I can remember, granted, I haven't been alive on this earth for a very long time, but still, for most of my time, whether it be as a Lions fan or Detroit sports fans in general, Jamie Samuelson's face, his voice, and his name has been a constant staple in terms of coverage, what to expect, analysis, all types of discussion regarding sports in our Detroit teams. He was a constant figure in both print, radio, as well as television. You saw him every single week on Sportsworks with Dan Miller and Wojo. You saw his articles in the paper. You saw what he was doing on 97.1 sometimes with Jamie, and then with Wojo, and then of course with Stoney. So to hear the fact that first and foremost he had revealed on the air that he had been battling cancer since January of last year, and now fast forward later that week, and then he unfortunately passes away as a result of his battle with colon cancer. It is a very stark reminder of how life can be too short, how life is so precious, can be taken away almost at an instant. And it is a very unfortunate thing that this happened to someone like Jamie, who was well respected and well loved by his colleagues, by his peers, by fans, and by just people in general. Not that many had a genuine, legit bad thing to say about Jamie. I think that shows the type of person that he is, the type, unfortunately I have to say was, in terms of using the past tense, but this hits me in a way because, again, I grew up watching his analysis, watching what he did on TV. So seeing this happen to him, it reminded me a lot of what happened with Tom Kowalski. And to Jamie, I say rest in peace, and to your family, my thoughts, prayers, condolences, well wishes are with them at this time.
Our wishes as well. So, Frank, closing statement and closing time. Go right ahead.
I do also have something to say about Jamie Samuelson. I mean, I'll admit there were times that I watched him a lot on Sportsworks, on Fox 2, would read about it, his columns in the Free Press and listen to him on 97.1. And there are times that, granted, I didn't agree with some of his opinions, most notably those on Ken Holland. But you know what? This still hits close to me as well. Not just the fact that the Detroit community lost a media member and respected journalist and sports radio personality and TV personality, but it also hits because he was a husband and father as well. And I mean, to his wife Christy and his 3 children, and I can't even imagine what you're going through. But the fact that he kept his cancer diagnosis that quiet and didn't come out in the air until like a week before he passed away. This man fought the good fight, and he braved it on. And really, the only way I can say to if you really want to remember him, men, this is something you need to check yourself for, or get checked for colon cancer and everything. I know it's not the most pleasant thing because I know people who've had to get checked for it, but I also have many friends who are doctors, and they'll say it's better for you to at least get checked so you can get treatment done if needed, and you don't end up having your life cut short.
Exactly.
There is a saying that the good die young.
Yes, and I hate to interrupt, Frank, but yeah, you hit it right on the head. And for Jamie to be gone at just 48 years of age just doesn't seem right. So please, all those who are listening to this and are listening or hearing of Jamie's story, please do what is necessary. Get yourself tested.
Yep, tested for colon cancer and for COVID-19. My closing statement, Chris Ilitch and Al Avila keep trotting pitchers that suck as the Tigers' starting pitchers, such as Matthew Boyd and Tyler Alexander, when they should have called up Casey Mize earlier before the season started, instead of designating him to an alternative training site, for God's sake. Ilitch and Avila keep doing things that just don't make any sense, and they keep neglecting those issues, just like Chris and his family neglect their properties that they own contain police stations that are being racist against all of humanity. That's my closing statement. Gentlemen, excellent job as always. We'll be back next week. For Ed Smith and Frank Vasner, this is Taylor Phillips signing off on the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. And remember, the truth is out there. TTFN, ta-ta for now. Bon appetit. Hit them with a hind. We rest our case. Stay safe.
New to Medicare? Start now. Go to myhealthpolicy.com to learn about some of the top-rated Medicare Advantage plans in your area, including plans for $0 a month in plan premiums, low out-of-pocket costs, and expansive provider networks. If you're thinking about a Medicare Advantage plan, myhealthpolicy.com is a great place to go to find a plan that meets your needs. Learn more about your options. Even talk with a licensed insurance agent. myhealthpolicy.com.